Moving on, Cheryl Twomey says, here we go. I don't get to read these often before the show. I just kind of grab them, print them, and cut and paste them. So, but I knew this one was going to be fun. Cheryl Twomey says, if you were hired as a consultant to Gene Roddenberry when he was developing Star Trek The Next Generation, how would you have changed the characters in the Federation so they would reflect less of a leftist philosophy in favor of the Kirk-era philosophy? And speaking of the Kirk-era philosophy, it's probably time for a wide shot. Would perpetually pain-feeling Troy have been the first cut? Yes, actually, having an attorney on the bridge and a therapist on the bridge. You know, they got the captain, and you've got the first officer, and you've got your therapist on the bridge. Yeah, that would have been the first thing that went. First of all, I would have made those two positions science officer and weapon officer, and I would have put them behind me so they don't get in my way, because I'm the captain, and I don't need somebody sitting next to me to ask opinions on. I don't, the Next Generation, I just had to show you the Gorn, I had to show you, Jimmy T back there and various enterprises, and so just so we know that we're dealing with a guy who's spent far too much time thinking about these kind of things, far too much time. Question mark in the Mysterian. So how would you change it? Well, the first thing you would do, right? I mean, if I was given the Next Generation, the first thing I would do is I would de-wussify it pretty hard. I mean, it's like, this guy who did the incredible Star Wars reviews, the guy who does the Plinkett reviews on Red State Media, took a look at the first 3 or 4 minutes of A New Hope, the original Star Wars. I don't know why we have to go and try and count out, was episode 4, whatever. Star Wars, the real Star Wars. The first 4 minutes of that versus the first 4 minutes of Phantom Menace. And he runs them side by side. And I know I'm crossing the streams here, and you're never supposed to cross the streams when you talk about Star Trek and Star Wars at the same time, but just stay with me here for a second. What he basically did was he showed the first frames of the original Star Wars and the first frames of Phantom Menace side by side. And in the original Star Wars, the first thing you see is a little tiny little ship running away, and it's little, and it's small, and it's powerless, and it's being pursued by this giant delta. And as the little ship runs away, this giant Star Destroyer comes over the camera, and since it's a wedge, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it fills the entire sky. And then the next thing you know, you've got humans who are nervous and scared looking, and they're fighting, and they're getting into position in the corridors, and the hull is breached, and these guys in white plastic stormtroopers come in, and they look like skeletons. They're supposed to look like skeletons. They've got the skull of a skeleton, the eyes of a skeleton. They're skeletons. White skeletons walk in. They're death creatures. You can't kill them because they're already skeletons. And then right behind him in comes a 7-foot-tall, guy with a black robe and a Nazi helmet, and his face is a plastic skull. And it's like, I think that might be the bad guy. And instantly, you're in it, and you're there. There's danger, and there's adventure, and there's excitement, and there's all these other things. And contrasting it with the Phantom Menace, the first thing you see are, as he said, it's a ship that looks like a donut with a bite taken out of it and the donut hole in the middle, and you got these two guys in robes, and they sit down and they drink tea, for God's sakes. I mean, this is the beginning of Star Wars, the opening scenes of Star Wars, and you got these two Jedi Knights sitting there drinking tea, talking about Trade Federation disputes, and it's like, well, what the hell is this anyway? Is this Star Wars, or is this star politics? It was like, it's like star bureaucracy, or it's appalling. It's awful. It's just dull. And it's the same thing with Next Generation. Next Generation is just dull. It's dull because it's all talk. It's all, Counselor Troy, well, I sense much hostility on the enemy bridge. Well, no kidding. They're launching photon torpedoes at us. What gave you the brilliant breakthrough, Deanna, that they're hostile? Was it the fact that they're trying to cut our hole open with energy weapons? Is that what gave it away to you? You genius, you? It's pathetic. It's pathetic from start to finish. So I'll just go down the list. Let's just go down the list. Let's start with the Enterprise. The Enterprise D, I know some people are going to have a little fit about this, but you're wrong. The Enterprise D is a pathetic-looking vehicle. It's all big head, and its hind section is this big. It looks like it needs to drag itself through space with the little rollers underneath the back. It's just this pathetic-looking thing that's just all head and no muscle, no legs, nothing. It's just a gross, fat, stupid, slow, bulbous junk pile. And yeah, it's awful. It's awful. and that's all you need to know about the series, right? I mean, there's no power in that ship. The little warp drive things are down there real low and they're real compact, and it's all about the big head and the little tiny little legs. It's like, don't get me started. So anyway, so you start with the ship. The ship's crap, and it looks like crap, and it's big, and the very first, nobody remembers this, but the pilot episode, Encounter at Farpoint, there's kids on board. There's little kids going through the hallway. It's not just an Enterprise, it's a village. It's a space village. Look, they've got kids. Awesome. That's great. They'll be the first one sucked out into space because a small hole will emit a child, but an adult will get stuck there. So the great thing about having kids on board a fighting warship, the flagship of the Federation, is that the kids can get sucked out of smaller holes than people can. So they make more space debris. I mean, why the hell do you have kids on board the Enterprise? What is he trying to say? I mean, what is Roddenberry trying to say when in the very first cut of the very first scene of the first time you're on board his new Enterprise, you see kids in the hall? Honestly, it's just, what? He's kind of, that's all you really need to know, right? I mean, really, I've never really thought this through before. It's kind of in real time for me, but as I try to avoid thinking about Next Generation if I can help it. But basically, what he's basically saying is that this is a village, and it's nice, and I've got a, and I'm the captain, but just because I'm the captain doesn't mean I make the decisions, heaven forbid. I've got my first officer here that I can bounce ideas off of and see if everything is copacetic, and over here I've got this lawyer, psychologist, counselor, in case I need, the emotional kind of input, like, I sense much hostility on the enemy bridge. Really? No. Go collect your paycheck. What do you say? What do you say about that? It's so nice. It's so fun. And that's why it's not Star Trek, right? That's why it's not Star Trek. Because you know that it's all about politics. And sure enough, they gave you a Federation where you don't discover new stuff. It's like you go from one place to another and you don't interfere. And you don't, and everything's a moral and ethical dilemma. And it's no action, and it's no discovery, and it's nowhere where no man has gone before. It's just we're going over here to settle a dispute between the Bajorans and the Cardassians. Oh, okay. Do we have a side here? Do we care? Not really, no. Are we going to see anything we haven't seen before? No, it's pretty much all explored. Really? Yeah, it's pretty much all explored. Kind of like Sherman Oaks then, is it? Yeah, we know where all the streets are, and we've all been there, and we've all been to Starbase 63, and we all know where everything is doing, and great, so fantastic. Now, Precious Snowflakes in the comments section says that military families do have kids, Bill. Correct, Precious Snowflake, they do, but they're not on board the aircraft carrier, right? The children of the Navy personnel that serve on the Nimitz aren't on board the Nimitz, and you know why they're not on board the Nimitz? Because the Nimitz might be attacked, and if the Nimitz is attacked, the kids are going to go down with the ship. We don't want the kids on the warship. We want the warship to protect the kids who are back home. And that's a perfect example. Of course, military families have kids. They don't go deploy. You don't put the kids in the lap of the B-2, and you don't have a child safety seat in the back of an F-16 when you're on a SAM suppression mission, because you want to kind of keep the kids safe. This is entirely my point. So, anyway, so you got this whole kind of Federation where there's nothing new, and there's nothing new. I mean, how are you gonna walk into a rock creature when everybody's been everywhere before? That was the great thing about the original series, is where no man has gone before. What's this? Well, we've never seen this before. Everything's like, yeah, of course we haven't seen this before. So that's the second problem. And then now let's just get into the characters. The captain of the Enterprise is going to be French. Okay. I'm just going to take a little break, and I'm just going to try and heal for a second. Just going to try and heal. I'm going to try and find a way to get over the shame of it. I just can't believe what I just said. I mean, he's French, and can it get worse? It can. Yeah, he's French, but we're going to give him one of these. What's the word? Is it Tony? Kind of a Tony British accent. He's so much better than everyone else. Like I'm Captain Picard, and I always do the right thing. It's like, you know what? I don't believe that you could open a jackknife if you really want to know. I believe you could argue with the jackknife, but I don't think you could open one. I don't believe you could use one. And it was like late in the thing where they have to invent something like the Picard maneuver. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. Give him a little badge he can wear as Picard maneuver. Every freaking week, Captain Kirk comes up with a maneuver that's never been done before. Oh, you have the Picard maneuver. Oh, yeah, whatever. It's weak. He's weak. He's a weak character. He's prissy and he's formal and Kirk's on shore leave. He goes down and drinks Romulan ale, and there's Orion slave girls dancing in front of him, and he's drinking Romulan ale, and he's getting lit because he's freaking God. He's a 33-year-old God. He's got all the power of humanity and technology and science behind him. And the guy, when you're done commanding that kind of power, you kind of want to go down and go to a strip club and watch some green alien chick dance in front of you, and you want to get blasted on Romulan ale. That's what men do. They don't sit around and sip Earl Grey tea hot and sit there with their archaeological treasures and have, these kind of platonic relationships with 65-year-old doctors of archaeology that he may have met back in London back 30 years ago. And, it's like, come on. Honestly, this is like, I can see this at the dentist's office, this kind of adventure. I can see this at the dentist's office. This is not something I have to watch science fiction for, to see an old, bald man kind of sipping his Earl Grey tea hot and having a high-level conversation with some doctor that he once had a thing for. And it's like, come on, give me something. I want some ray guns. I want some action. The only character on Next Generation that I liked a little was Riker, because Riker at least looked like he could have been on the original series. Riker could have been on the original Enterprise. They wouldn't have airlocked him. They wouldn't have spaced him, wouldn't have chucked him in the airlock, knocked him on the head, put him in the airlock, blown him out into space. Oops, terrible accident on Deck 3. Riker was the only guy on Next Generation who looked like he was kind of fun. He was kind of a rogue. He's got a little thing going, he's kind of got the babes lined up, and he's not a baby, and he's, he looks like a relatively competent guy. But the rest of them are just, I kind of like Data, okay, I guess, but it's like, okay, he's Pinocchio. He wants to be a real boy. Got it. Got it. Got it. It's like, I don't know. Just go on. But the main thing about the Next Generation, really, and I've said it many times, and this is really what you can put the whole thing in a nutshell. And I did. I've done it several times. And here it is. Ready? James T. Kirk made the Federation safe for Jean-Luc Picard. It's just that simple. Kirk was out there shooting lizard-headed computers and dealing with Andromedans that could turn you into a little cube of like laundry detergent, and he was out there killing Klingons because they deserved it, and all this other stuff, and here this is the point. You saw it several times. If Kirk went and took the original Enterprise to a planet where humans were enslaved by a robot, or enslaved by something or other, or enslaved by this, or enslaved by that, if he saw humans enslaved and dependent, Kirk would turn the phasers on that thing, and he'd burn that down to the ground, and they'd say, how are we going to live? Well, it's not our problem, but you're going to live. Remember this? How many times that happened? There's the giant, what was it? It might have been the apple. I always get that mixed up with the one where everybody's going like this, the one with the ball, the giant reptile-headed computer, and everybody is happy, and everybody's lovely, and all they do is love each other, and nobody gets old, and nobody gets sick, and all they do all their entire lives is sit and live happy lives of 4-year-old children and shovel, leaves into Ball so that Ball can continue to exist, and Ball controls the weather, and everything's calm and nice, and everything's groovy and cool, and nobody fights, and everything's fantastic. And Kirk beams down to this planet, and he sees all these people living like 4-year-olds, and he says Ball has made these people into children. They're dependent on the government, basically, is what Kirk says. And he says, that ain't right. And he just puts the phasers on Ball and vaporizes it. And then it's like, now what do we do? Now you're going to have to figure out how to live like adults. And off he goes. And stick around. He doesn't, probably doesn't even get a Christmas card from him. He's just gone. And he does it again. I used to have all these episodes memorized. There was one where the two cultures are they're in war. They've been at war for hundreds of years. And so since they've been at war for hundreds of years, why blow up buildings and destroy buildings with actual bombs? Why not just have computers run simulations of a simulated attack, simulated defense, calculate the casualties, and people just walk into the disintegration booth, and it's stable, and the societies have been doing this for 200 years, and everything's stable, and everything's cool, and Kirk comes in here and says, it's an abomination. He said, war is bloody. If you guys are at war and you're killing each other, then let's see some blood. And if you're not ready to see some blood, maybe you guys could make peace. Blows up these computers, blows up these incinerating things, and boom, gone. So he's interfering on, it's Baal, not Baal. Baal is a Babylonian god. Yeah, thank you, Mike. But in any event, right? So he's intervening. Taste of Armageddon. See, I knew Dave Big Boutte. In any event, you get the idea, right? He sees humans dependent and weak, and he goes in there and busts it up. Then he leaves. Picard, on the other hand, the whole movie, one of those god-awful movies, Insurrection or something, is all about we can't interfere. Really? No. You see, that's how we prove our moral superiority, by not interfering. Yes, well, these humans are being enslaved, and yes, they're being tortured, yes, they're being murdered, yes, but we're not going to interfere, you see, because we're so much more morally advanced than the people that are being killed. So we're not going to interfere, and that's how we're going to show everybody how morally superior we are. We're going to show them how morally superior we are by showing them that we're not morally superior to them. Pretty much that's the deal, right? Who are we to say that a society where people live lives is better than one that treats them as herd animals? Who are we to say? Who are we to say? That's why we have the Prime Directive. Who are we to say? Kirk says, I'm saying it's wrong, and it is, so to hell with you. Fire me if you want to. It's really that simple. I don't know what happened to Roddenberry's brain. He just turned into mush, but, yeah, I don't know. I would have basically, if I'd had the Next Generation, I would have recast, if the predication was that you cannot just basically restart the original series, I would have basically kept everything that I liked, and I would have put them on a slightly bigger, certainly tougher and more powerful ship, and I would have turned everything up to 11. I wouldn't have turned it down to 2. I would have had everybody be a little more badass, and that would have been the end of that. And that show would have been like, yeah, right, that's cool. Nobody asked me, though. That was their critical mistake.